would it mean to the world if you found out that the book of Revelation, that the entire world found out that the book of Revelation had already taken place in the Millennial Kingdom of Christ? In other words, Jesus had already returned, and people were now living in a totally different timeline, one in which they did not understand the times or the seasons. They didn't quite understand what was really going on behind the scenes with political maneuvers or where they actually were on this place they lived. Would it be a catastrophic type of event if it were to be revealed? I'm about to tell you that this entire theory is now about to become mainstream. I mean, Joe Rogan level, mainstream, millions of people finding out that this is now a real and viable theory. This sounds crazy to everyone I know, especially if you're a biblical scholar or you're a Christian and you've gone to church your entire life. I know I went to seminary school and had to get up and walk out when I fully began to learn exactly what the theme was behind what was being taught. And that is a theme of a particular type of Bible that arose only about 80 or 90 years ago and was pushed into the mainstream church. And now the entire world has been deceived by a different timeline in the 10 years Christians did not believe. I like to think of things kind of like a formula, an if-then formula. In other words, if this happened, then that. Okay, well, if that happened, then what is the statistical probability of that? And if it weighs out to be powerful enough, that's probably the truth. So let's begin. So I want you to understand something so this gets a little clearer. The way that this has been blinded over the eyes of the average Christian is about like this. Take this object right here. They have told you what happened. They have told you what's going on with it, and they have superseded what you would have figured out on your own had they not told you in advance something that wasn't true. Am I telling the truth? Am I completely crazy? Let's delve into it and find out. So what we have is a series of events. The first thing we need to look at to clear up this is the knowledge that there were letters. The New Testament is a book of letters and information to who? Us, 2,000 years later? No. These things were written to people alive during the time of Christ or shortly after as letters to the churches or to individuals on how to conduct themselves, or testimonies about Christ, or like in the case of John writing Revelation, telling people what was about to happen imminently. So the term used quite often is at hand. The coming of the Lord, the events that are going to occur, all these things are reference to something at hand, meaning getting ready to happen almost immediately. And Jesus even looked at the people standing there he was talking to and said, you, he pointed at them, he said, you, some of you standing here are not going to die before you see the return of the Son of Man. Enter in 2,000 years later, preemptive programming, where you tell individuals a story you want them to believe for a particular reason and get them to believe something that bypasses their common sense. That being that, hey, this book was written, statistically made it about us now. Now, I've heard before this, I believed this extensively most of my life because I didn't know better and I didn't have advanced knowledge I do now about things. And really, if you look at this, all it takes is for someone like me right now to tell you to think about who the letters were written to. And when you do, you say to yourself, wow, you're right. Those letters were written to those people. Jesus did say these things were going to happen at that time or within the lifetime of these people. All the information was written to the churches and the people saying that these things are going to happen, and it's at hand. Now, get the preemptive programmers who come in and they say, well, a day to the Lord is like 1,000 years. All right, get into this now. They have used Old Testament things. They have used cherry-picking scriptures and stuff to divert you, to get you to believe, because it's more fantastical. It makes you feel special about the Bible is really about me now, or I'm going to see these great miraculous events. Isn't that exciting? That gets the church pews filled. That gets people coming. That gets people interested in the pastor. There's something about to happen. What's going on? I need you to tell me. Let me give you some money. The time of Christ or shortly thereafter, to give them warning and information about what's to take place. Now, the events to follow this, things like tribulation, appear to have already happened. Tribulation, that's when the mountains appear to melt like wax, and buildings and great destruction and suffering like never before. People say, oh, well, that has not taken place yet. This great cataclysm has not taken place. Okay, I'm going to now blow your mind with this. It is now surfacing because of the internet and the freedom and the ability to people to pull up things from all around the world we were never able to see before. Buildings that were melted, bricks melted, entire structures. We have no explanation to what melted buildings in an era within the past 500 years. And this is all around the world. Red brick buildings, different buildings. In fact, even in America, what they have tried to pretend that we are 5 years old in elementary school and teaching us things, showing us pictures of stuff and telling us they're natural formations. Now, as you look at these pictures, and as I'm telling you this, you're going to awaken to it. As you look at pictures from all across America and all across the world, you'll see images of places they told us were natural formation. And if you put a city up beside these formations, a modern city or an ancient city, and then look at this structure, this gigantic thing, it looks identical to a melted city, not some kind of natural formation, because formations don't form right angles, they don't form towers, they don't form these things that look like a magnificent city that was melted somehow, like in the book of Revelation. We also find writings of great cataclysms from ancient times, such as the sun not giving its light for an entire season, that winter lasting all throughout the summer, great ice age type of things taking place. We also find something that is not speculative, but is all around the world and has no explanation for anyone in the scientific field. In fact, they avoid it like the plague, and that is something, if you haven't heard of it yet, called the mud flood. This is an event that has buried what is supposed to be modern buildings. Supposedly, we are told buildings built in the 1800s, late 1800s, very nice, extravagant buildings. We can't explain how they built these things. Even castles, going back to what they say were from the Middle Ages, you find that several floors of the building, 1, 2, 3, or more floors of the building, is completely buried underground. So you'll see these in a lot of cities you go to, say at Chicago, say at San Francisco or somewhere, and you'll be walking along, and as you look over to the side, you'll see these small little windows. And we've all seen them, and we think to ourselves, that's really weird. Why would they build these little windows, like half a window and a little bigger window, on like a hill going down, and you have this little window and this little window, isn't it smaller? Some of them are even dug out some, so you have it. And you wonder, like, who would build a structure like that? But it's been dismissed as us being told that that's just the basement. And you think, well, maybe that's how they did that a long time ago. Until you see where a crew comes in and they have to replace a big pipe, or they're putting in something within the streets, some massive electrical cable, whatever they're doing. And then they dig down 40 feet along the side of these buildings. And what do you find? 2 more floors to the building, a door in the old roadway, buried 40 feet underground. Now, this isn't natural sediment formation. We know that. Who would have an extravagant building or a place they're using or streets and allow dirt to keep building up to where you can't even enter into the door? And that keeps building up year after year within a short amount of time to where 40 feet of that building is buried. Here's where we get into the next phase of this, and that is the fact that on the side of these buildings 40 feet up where we walk today is a plaque. And that plaque will say something like founded in 1897. And it will come along with a story you can find on the internet giving the name of someone, random person who got chosen. Of course, they did a type of lottery or some kind of thing where this person, they all put their names in a hat, and this random person never built anything before he gets chosen, and he builds this building in like a year. Well, we couldn't construct this building with modern equipment and dumps trucks and all the things we have now, and it would take several years, maybe 2-3 years with modern equipment. But the story is this random person with no skill builds this elaborate building. Problem: the plaque 40 feet up doesn't tell us that the actual street and things are buried underneath. What I'm saying is they lied. And this is repeated from the East Coast across America to the West Coast in every major city. What happened? They found these buildings. Here's where we are getting into the reset information, and that our history, even American history, is something totally different, because we're dealing with what's called now the Millennial Kingdom, having already come and gone, and we are in a different timeline now called the short season. Back to ancient times. That is one path we just covered. Now, ancient times, here we are in tribulation period. We read about a time when the Roman emperor begins the persecution of the Christians. We know about Christians being strung up and hung on crosses, even burnt as living torches to light gardens. Has there ever been a time of any kind of persecution of any people in mass that matched this, where thousands and thousands of people were taken into coliseums, and the public would go like a football game and watch Christians be eaten by lions, or be tortured to death somehow, or gladiators stabbing them and doing all kinds of horrible things to them as a public event? Has there ever been such a time of tribulation as this? Now, that goes along with the theme of tribulation taking place, along with the sun not giving its light, along with cataclysms and buildings being melted and great catastrophes worldwide. Imagine a catastrophe that took place that buried cities in 40 feet of mud or dirt or ash from volcanoes. Imagine what would happen to the taking place. Would there ever have been a time? Nothing has ever been a cataclysm where the whole world, every city from America to Russia to Japan, has these cities and evidence being buried in 40 feet, 20 feet of mud. People would have starved. It would have been a time like never before. Not the world hasn't even seen. We're talking nuclear war level destruction, or things that could have occurred. This is something that we're not taught in the history books, because we are in a time of great deception, and even the church, through a particular Bible and a group of pastors paid to launch this information in the past 80 years or so, has completely deceived the world. So we have evidence of the possibility of tribulation taking place. We have the emperor of Rome persecuting Christians, and a people group in that matter. Christians have been the most persecuted group of people in world history. I know that a certain group claims that they are the most persecuted, but they don't even stand even a small chance against what has occurred to Christians in the past 2,000 years. Now, in the book of Revelation, it talks about Jesus then returning. So we have the destruction of Jerusalem, which it told us about in 70 AD. That is a historical fact. Then we have the possibility of the burying of certain cities, destruction taking place through evidence in modern times we can look at right now called mud flood. Here's another oddity that goes along with, Jesus talked about, he said, in my Father's house there are many mansions, and I go to prepare a place for you. So Jesus ascends, and then somehow during the Middle Ages, we are told about these primitive people in this dark time where people basically wore very simple clothes, and they lived in grass huts and whatever. They farmed potatoes, and they were primitive, and not much happened. Simultaneously, they expect us to believe that these magnificent structures, like in Georgia and Russia, or these magnificent castles we see in Scotland and England, where there is no explanation how this castle was built on the side of a mountain, with stones weighing great amounts, without dump trucks or power tools or any of that type of stuff. No roads, no paved roads like we have supposedly. And yet these castles have marble floorings. We have cathedrals that were built at this time that we cannot explain, that going inside of them and singing produces a resonance, a certain vibratory cycle that is an exact frequency, like say 437 hertz, let's say. An entire massive structure, let's say it's 100, 200 feet high, and this huge entire room resonates like an instrument. We cannot construct these things today. They supposedly did not have the scientific electronic instruments to know what and how to create the seismic frequencies or what they might be to an exact tuning during that time. How would they build a building or a city, for that matter, that would resonate at a certain frequency? You find the windows of these cathedrals with certain structures in them that are seismic representations of seismic frequencies, just like we use now, and it shows up, or we have instruments that will show if you make a certain sound, it'll form a certain pattern. And the windows in these cathedrals are exact matches to these patterns. How would they have known primitive, middle-aged people? Now, as our formula goes in reasoning, like I said, I like to have an if-then formula. If they didn't have the tools and instruments that we have now, if they were primitive and unable to do things, if they were a Bronze Age people, let's say, and they had chisels that could not even cut these materials, these stones that would have taken a diamond chisel now, then it's not possible. The if-then theory of the history we have been told does not match at all. The statistical probability of the story we've been told about history and about the Bible and about things to come in Revelation now, statistically, are not weighing out heavily in our favor as to the fact that Revelation has already taken place, that Jesus told the truth, that John and Paul and all the writers in the Bible writing letters to the churches and telling people, they were telling those people that it was imminent, it was at hand, and it was going to take place. And there's more probability that it took place now as evidence keeps getting revealed that the Millennial Kingdom of Christ already happened. What else is evidence of this? Well, of course, come. The theme being that we are in a dispensational period of time, that Christians aren't the chosen people, that it's someone else, that we are waiting for Christ to return. And all the letters written to the churches were really written to churches now. They stretched the theme of this. One of my favorite pastors was a master at doing this, making you believe that the church in Sardis or the church of Laodicea and all these churches, even churches that don't exist anymore, actually are churches now, and that the book of Revelation was written for a generation 2,000 years later, and all these things are about to take place now. And they make it sure seem like all the bad going on in the world is really revelation or tribulation or things about to take place. The reason they did this was to establish a certain nation state overseas and get Christians to support it. And most of all the evil deeds taking place in this short season of Satan, that Christians would simply stand down, do nothing, and wait for Jesus to take them away in the magic spaceship. The purpose was to get the church to stand down and believe Revelation, that Jesus hadn't returned, and that Revelation was now is stacking up. And this thing called the Millennial Reign of Christ that we have been told is going to come after the magic spaceship comes and raptures us away, which has already happened. Okay, so we're believing this theme now, and that the church, probably 99% of the church, believes in the current theme. You have not been told that there were actual ancient writings about saints that were beheaded. This is after Christ, during the tribulation time, and that there were writings about saints that were resurrected, and they were basically like angelic figures of the New and Old Testament with supernatural powers. Very extensive writings about these saints and their ruling and their answering to Christ in this entire time period. There were writings that existed, and the Catholic Church, of course, buried many of them in vaults. Some have been leaked out or some have been found, but these writings explain to us about these superhuman, glorified body saints. We see in some of the churches, which I thought was very odd, even seemingly evil, where there was all of these bones kept in churches. Why would a church keep bones, human bones, in churches or have them stacked up or kept places? Well, explanation. When the saints died, their they received a glorified body, they were resurrected. The first resurrection of the dead. You know, the whole story of the first shall be last and the last shall be first and all of these things like that. Well, that's all hard for us to understand except for if it already happened. And they kept their bodies, or found their bodies, and their bones were kept as glorified relics of the saints. Makes sense now, doesn't it? Very strange events. We also have things where you see millions of bones of people seemingly in these underground tunnels in France and different places, and they're stacked up, and we wonder where and why and how did millions of people's bones, how did mass amounts of people die suddenly and have to be placed somewhere like this? At first we think it's something very nefarious and evil, unless a cataclysmic event took place and there were mass casualties all at one time. A strange concept, I know. I'm trying to bring you into, at least in this short time, a knowledge that the Millennial Kingdom already took place. And within this, what I'm going to tell you is this is now taking monumental, it's on a locomotive path of exposure getting out to the public. This knowledge, this exposure of the history of the buildings, of the melted buildings, of the cover-ups of the cities, of our history, of the fact that the Russian mathematician discovered that our timeline has been altered and most of history is actually faked or was manufactured or is the same story over and over, that we have had maybe 700 years added to our timeline. This is all very bizarre because it's math, and math doesn't lie. History teachers can lie. People who altered things to take control or a great reset can lie. But when you get into the formulas of if, then, and then statistical probability, it is weighing heavily that the Millennial Kingdom of Christ and the evidence for his existence and the saints and all the things of tribulation have already taken place. Now, I don't have time in this short video today to go through all of those things at one time. It is too fascinating. It is too extensive. We're talking about 1,000 years of history and cover-ups. All I'm giving you is an if-then formula and statistical probability. I know it is very difficult to understand. And one of the first things you may look at is the Scofield Bible. Once you understand where that came from, how it got here, and why, you will have a very thorough knowledge of the cover-ups beginning. Now, I've done over 200 videos on my other channel, which got for that information, and explaining in depth a lot of these theories, showing the castle, showing the impossibility of their creation under the narratives we've been taught. The great buildings that existed in America, the Roman buildings that they told us were temporary, or they told us were World's Fairs, which are now quite ridiculous in the if-then and statistical probability formulas, because some of the buildings they said are temporary are still standing today, and they are very, very solid. What I'm telling you is these buildings were already here. There was a glorified group of people who built these, or possibly even angelic beings came down with Christ and built them, and that there is a great cover-up up until this point now. Now, here's where I'm going to tell you something as this begins to get revealed. It's going to follow along the lines because it's been up until this point right now under the radar, kind of like Flat Earth was under the radar for a while, kind of like the whole when these things were out and people started coming out and telling you about how they might not be good for you. For a while, it was under the radar, but now it's going mainstream and quickly because the evidence is so astounding. Here's what's going to happen, because I have created, now being in this for over 20 some years, formulas and different abilities to predict how the dark side reacts to things. What you're going to see is now counter narratives arising. Major church figures coming out, teachers, scientists, people coming out to dismiss the evidence or the possibility. This is to keep the average person from hearing about it, from looking into it, and they'll use the typical sequence of of laughing and scoffing and mocking the idea. You'll see it arise on mainstream news, and they'll be like, ah, ha, ha, ha. They'll have official priest from the Catholic Church dismissing it and telling how ridiculous it is. Or they'll have some major pastor who gives you the same old rundown, and it reinforces people's cognitive programming. The Millennial Kingdom movement already occurring is going to get majorly squashed. What's going to happen, because it's gone under the radar, the people that invented and started this many, many years ago, they're old and dead. And the people carrying on the program, running the systems of control, have long since forgot about it. It's not, they never even themselves thought that this would arise and become a threat to the system. But now that it has, the eye of Sauron is going to fall upon it. And many people, the Christian church especially, that needs to know about it. The world, in fact. If the world found out about the fact that Jesus Christ did exist, that our history narrative has been covered up so that people don't know Christ was here, imagine the implications now, because those involved in this system, the people making videos now, the very prominent people catching on and getting the attention of people, have not thoroughly thought about the implications of this narrative going mainstream. It destroys every other religion on the planet. And they're not going to let that happen. It destroys the authority of certain governmental associations because they were built on certain narratives, and they cannot have that. It destroys certain banking narratives. It destroys certain legal and lawfare information because people realize it's not Christ-centered, but it's Satan-centered. And the people making these videos have gone too fast, too quickly, without reaching enough people, not realizing the eye of Sauron is going to realize that this narrative that has gone under the radar to even it has now reached mainstream surface. And it's going to be squashed. It's going to be shut down. It's going to be banned. You try to post something on Facebook and it's going to be misinformation. You try to make something on TikTok and your whole channel is going to get taken down. My friends, know that I know already how this works. So if you'd like to be able to research this more before it goes mainstream and gets taken down, if you'd like to stay in the loop, I have a private group you can join to share information, to learn more, and to go into the details of this you can't talk about that would offend people, and we don't want to do that. So if you'd like to join the True Council, I'm going to leave a link in the description below where we can dive deep into these things amongst people who care and want to learn more about it. Because soon, and very soon, within the next year at most, you will never hear this mainstream again. All right, guys, leave a link in the description below and you can join it. Talk to you soon. I hope you enjoyed this. Has there ever been such a time of tribulation as this? Now, that goes along with the theme of tribulation taking place, along with the sun not giving its light, along with cataclysms and buildings being melted and great catastrophes worldwide. Imagine a catastrophe that took place that buried cities in 40 feet of mud or dirt or ash from volcanoes. Imagine what would happen to the taking place. Would there ever have been a time? Nothing has ever been a cataclysm where the whole world, every city from America to Russia to Japan, has these cities and evidence being buried in 40 feet, 20 feet of mud. People would have starved. It would have been a time like never before. Not the world hasn't even seen. We're talking nuclear war level destruction or things that could have occurred. This is something that we're not taught in the history books because we are in a time of great deception, and even the church, through a particular Bible and a group of pastors paid to launch this information in the past 80 years or so, has completely deceived the world. So we have evidence of the possibility of tribulation taking place. We have the Emperor of Rome persecuting Christians, and a people group in that matter. Christians have been the most persecuted group of people in world history. I know that a certain group claims that they are the most persecuted, but they don't even stand even a small chance against what has occurred to Christians in the past 2,000 years. Now, in the book of Revelation, it talks about Jesus then returning. So we have the destruction of Jerusalem, which it told us about in 70 AD. That is a historical fact. Then we have the possibility of the burying of certain cities, destruction taking place through evidence in modern times we can look at right now called mud flood. Here's another oddity that goes along with, Jesus talked about, he said, in my Father's house there are many mansions, and I go to prepare a place for you. So Jesus ascends, and then somehow during the Middle Ages, we are told about these primitive people in this dark time where people basically wore very simple clothes and they lived in grass huts and whatever. They farmed potatoes and they were primitive and not much happened. Simultaneously, they expect us to believe that these magnificent structures like in Georgia and Russia, or these magnificent castles we see in Scotland and England, where there is no explanation how this castle was built on the side of a mountain with stones weighing great amounts, without dump trucks or power tools or any of that type of stuff. No roads, no paved roads like we have supposedly. And yet these castles have marble floorings,